And a very good morning to you. My name is Chris Deasy. I'm one of the lecturers on the Religious Studies programme here at the University of Kent, and I'd like to talk you through what we offer here at Kent in Religious Studies and Global Philosophies. So one of the things that I think is really distinctive, something that you don't get in all university departments of Religious Studies or Theology or Global Philosophies, is the intersection between religion and culture. So we'll be looking at the way in which religion is not something that should only be understood in terms of its relationship with people who believe and are members of a particular community of faith. So we're not just looking, for example, at what Buddhists think or Hindus think or Muslims think or Christians think. What we will do is look at the way in which there is an intersection between religion and media and the economy and the environment. So we might, for example, look at the role that megachurches play. Now, megachurches are particularly big in America, and they are huge gatherings in which you might have, under the rubric of a particular religious denomination, normally Christian, what you will have is groups of people coming together, and they might on one level be coming together because they are members of a particular church, but what they'll also be doing is taking part in perhaps sporting activities. So they might undertake basketball, or there may be group counselling, or there might be a music gig or a film screening. There will be an opportunity for people to come together who share a particular attitude, but it's not just about something that is demonstrably or ostensibly religion oriented. So it's not just about people saying, oh, I'm going to go and do something religious this evening. They might say, well, I'm going to go and see a gig. I'm going to do something sporty. I'm going to go and perhaps undertake something with my friends or with my family. And that kind of coming together, that kind of bonding, is something which takes a number of different forms. We might, in many respects, characterise these as very secular pursuits. We might say, well, when people go to a gig, well, that's not something that's very religious. But what might be happening there is that the music, the content, the lyrics, the particular religious orientation of the performers all dovetail together. So we might also look in a course like Religious Studies or Global Philosophies at the role of film. And I've given an example here on the slide in the bottom right of the film Network from 1976, where you have a TV newsreader who loses his mind. He's having a nervous breakdown. But what he sees himself as is this mad prophet of the airwaves. He is somebody who wants to present himself as somebody who has a role to play in questioning people's value system, the things that they hold dear, their values, their ideals, their needs. And he wants to ask questions about why we do the things that we do, and why do we do them in the way that we do them, and why do we do them with the people we do them with. We'll also look at important issues around sexuality and around race. Black Klansman actually is a very good example. The Spike Lee film from 2018 raises very important questions about religion and society, but looking at it very much through the lens of race and interracial relations. And that will certainly link with issues, for example, around liberation theology or black theology, which we cover in our teaching here at the University of Kent. We also will look in the bottom left-hand corner at ideas around the way religion evolved and developed, coming from the Latin religio, to bind. That sense of community, that sense of people coming together under the auspices of a particular belief system or value system. It's about community, it's about shared interest, it's about social order and stability, something which the French sociologist Émile Durkheim was talking about a century ago. So we are very much aware, certainly since I did my own degree back in the early 1990s, that religion intersects with all sorts of political, social, economic debates, certainly after 9/11 and 7/7. And so one of the things that we'll be doing is saying that because religion is so contentious, it's so pressing, not just because of people like Richard Dawkins, who have obviously very clear-cut views about what religion is and some of the dangers associated with religion, but the way in which people who are of believing communities or people who are outside of a faith community will ask questions about what they see when they switch on the television news of an evening and they see somebody wearing particular headwear or particular clothing or uniform, and they don't necessarily recognise or they don't engage with that? What is it about the other? What is it about people who have belief or value systems that are different from our own? All these sort of questions come under the rubric of what we cover in a degree programme like religious studies. So what is it also to be human? What are the things that make us tick? What are the things that motivate us and drive us, give us our sense of structure and goal and telos? Is there a religious framework? But is that religious framework only to be determined by people in religious authority? Is it about the people who run organisations? Is it about people who run churches and temples and synagogues and mosques? What about, that's the top-down model. What about a more bottom-up model in terms of the way particular communities will say, these are the things that matter to us, these are the ideals, these are the things in need, these are the things that bother us and affect us in our everyday lives. Who is it that represents us? Who is it that speaks for us? So we look at religion in a whole variety of top-down and bottom-up contexts. And as you'll see on the slide here, we examine how religious studies is fascinating and exciting because it is about debating the big issues. It's about gaining a deeper insight into why people believe the variety of things that they do. It's about investigating the impact of religion on the world in its historical context, in the present, and also the kind of world, the kind of tomorrow that we might look forward to seeing encapsulated and being realised. So concomitant with this are questions around truth and justice, living a good life. These are some of the very foundational questions that the Religious Studies programme at Kent is going to engage with. Why do things matter to us? What are sacred values? How do we evaluate them? What are the tools, what are the resources that we use in order to address some of these foundational questions? One of the things that I find always very fascinating is the definitional questions of religion. What is religion? How do we categorise it? How do we classify it? One of the modules that we run in the first year is called What is Religion? And one of the things that we will do in this module, for example, is look at various sources around, for example, what happened a decade or so ago when a member of the Church of Jedi went into a Tesco store in North Wales and he was told to remove his uniform, his distinctive brown hood, because it was deemed to go against what the Tesco store policy was on people wearing hoodies. The individual concerned, Daniel Jones, claimed that he was being victimised over his beliefs and he was left emotionally humiliated. So we look at what constitutes a religion. What are the criteria? What are the breadth and the depth of the things that go into making something religious? Who is within that orb? Who is outside of it? Who decides? And what are the legal and ethical and social implications of this? So that's one such example. And in many respects, this comes down to the census from 2001. And on the screen here, you'll see about the census returns from the 2001 census, when we learned that nearly 400,000 people in England and Wales said that they were devoted followers of the Jedi faith. So one of the things that we'll do, for example, in a module like Religion and Film, which is one of the modules that I teach, is ask all of these questions about how is it that something from popular culture, something from a popular film, can generate religious questions, giving people a sense of value and identity and indeed of hope. So these are some of the things that we will look at across a range of the modules that we run on the programme. So it's very important in terms of looking at what religious studies graduates are doing, the kinds of things that people who've done degrees in religious studies will go on in terms of their careers, in terms of their professions, in terms of their vocations to follow through. What does it say about the way in which we understand a multicultural society to flourish? What are some of the safeguarding issues? What are the certain strengths and weaknesses of what religion can do? How tolerant, how empathetic are we able to be around these foundational questions? This is a slide that gives you an insight into the departmental makeup. So we've got a range of colleagues here at the University of Kent. I'm the third one down. I'm Chris Deasy. I've been at Kent since 2004. You see references there to some of my other colleagues, such as Richard King, who is the head of department. We have Professor Jeremy Corrett, Professor of Philosophy, Religion and Culture, Yvonne Sherwood, Professor of Biblical Cultures and Politics, and Leslie DeVry, Lecturer in East Asian Studies. One of the things that we have to do in addition to our teaching is undertake research. Some of us are involved in some very pioneering ventures. We have Lois Lee, for example, who does work on understanding unbelief. What is it about people's value systems, when people say who they are, when people define themselves, when people present themselves? Do people say that they are Hindu, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, etc.? Or they might say, as well as don't know, or atheist, they might say, I'm non-religious. And that's one of the areas that, through empirical fieldwork, that Lois is investigating. I've done some work on Christmas. That's one of the books that I wrote a few years ago, Christmas as Religion, Rethinking Santa, the Secular and the Sacred, from a few years ago. One of my other colleagues is doing work on child migration, another on blasphemy. So these are some of the cutting-edge issues. Mindfulness is another that Richard King is heavily involved with. What is the relationship between religion and meditation and mindfulness? So one of the things that, if you're very interested in doing a degree in religious studies, is that we will ask questions about the major issues of the day. How can religion be applied in the world at large? And we will do that through a range of modules. Some of them will be tradition-led, for example, Judaism and Islam, Hinduism and Buddhism. We will run these modules without any expectation that you will be experts in these areas. We don't expect you necessarily at A level to be proficient in world religions. You might, for example, have come from a philosophy and ethics program, and that will be very, very much encompassed in the religious studies degree as well. But what we will do is ask questions about the role of religion in the contemporary world. We will ask questions about the global search for meaning. What is it about this pursuit of the good life and its relationship to ethics, society and religion? So these are some of the questions that we will ask in the very first year of your degree programme. As we move on to stages 2 and 3, these are just some of the modules that we teach. I also offer a module available to second year students on death and the afterlife, in which we'll look at near-death experiences and mind-dependent worlds, and ask questions about what Muslims and Jews and Christians and Hindus think about heaven and hell and reincarnation, etc. We'll also offer modules on religion and Japanese culture, the sacred in contemporary society. We will crack some biblical codes. We'll look at religion and film. We'll look at death of God, asking questions about the role of Christian theology in the modern world. We'll do various comparative-based modules. We'll look at global Christianities, health, medicine and the body in East Asia, themes in the study of Asia. So that's just an example of some of the modules that we run. Sociology of religion is another module that's very popular. We'll have ethics-based modules as well. I think what we offer is a real flexibility of choice. We give you the opportunity to specialise or to range broadly across a whole range of different areas, cultures and methodologies, the way in which we ask questions about what religion is. There's going to be, across the faculty, across the division, a student support team for pastoral support. So many of us will have what's called an open door policy, or certainly a policy whereby we will guarantee to be in our offices at particular times. You will be allocated an academic advisor. We will be there to answer any questions that you have. You might be worried about your coursework. You might be worried about the exams. You might have questions about the modules that you want to take in a future year. You might need advice on job applications. You might need a reference. So you will be assigned an academic advisor. And what we will do in that role is to help you through your studies, enable you to flourish. Every module will have a Moodle page, an online resource, and that's where you'll find everything from the essay questions and the reading lists and the reading materials for each individual seminar, as well as the site for you to upload your essays and assignments. You'll also get your feedback that way as well. We will run lectures and seminars for all of our modules. Not all modules have exams. The length of the lecture or the seminar will depend on which year you're in, and they will be relatively small groups, so you'll have the chance to work with people that you know from your other modules. You'll be able to work together and see through your studies in an environment, sometimes giving things like presentations, maybe joint presentations. 2 or 3 of you will give a talk about something that you've covered in the module, and it'll be your way to present material. Great skills, actually, in terms of what you go on to do when it comes to entering the world of work. Being able to talk for 3 or 4 minutes on a chosen topic, engage with your fellow students, and give some indication as to what it is that you find to be really important. What are the most pressing questions, the key questions and debates, and then have the opportunity to answer some of the questions that your peers, your fellow students, will ask you based on the presentation that you've just carried out. We put our lectures on PowerPoint, and you're able to access those after the lecture. We also record our lectures, so if you want, for example, to undertake some revision, or you're writing an essay and you want to re-familiarise yourself with something that was covered in the lecture, then you have the opportunity at your own leisure to go through all of that. The other programme that we offer is Global Philosophies, an exciting, innovative opportunity to engage with intellectual thought from around the world. And we focus on a whole range of traditions, not just European. We look at Asia, Africa and the Middle East, from antiquity right up to the present day. So there's something very comparative and cross-cultural about the programme, and this is reflected in the modules on the Global Philosophies programme that we run. And we look at the context of philosophical ideas. It's the way in which particular cultures and societies and languages are able to frame themselves, the sort of debates that may arise in different countries and continents, among different nationalities, different groups of people. It's very much about worldview studies. So the global search for meaning, we will look at, for example, different philosophical traditions around the world. We'll look at it in a Greco-Roman context, European, Indian, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Jewish, and so on. It's not just about finding non-Western examples that fit into the existing paradigm of what counts as philosophy. We ask important questions about how particular debates, like what I was saying earlier about some of the bottom-up as opposed to top-down paradigms, can enable us to ask critical questions. They may not be the important questions that people are writing about or have historically written about. They may be particularly related to what's going on in the world around us. We look at the coronavirus pandemic, for example. There will be questions there about the way in which the NHS is sacred. But how does that tally with what's going on in China, or in South Korea, or in India, or in Russia, or in America? So we will look at a whole range of questions that might be unique to particular cultures and continents and traditions. What are the things that also we have in common? How have humans, across the course of human history, understood the universe, life and its meaning, what it is to be human, community, sexuality, gender and nature, global warming, climate change, etc. What are the rituals? What are the social institutions involved? What are the myths that are generated? One of the things that we look at, for example, is sport. We will look at what it is about sport or film or music, which could be seen to be taking on religious roles and functions. What are the myths? Even things that are not designated or classed as being religious. How do they relate to? How do they correspond to what we might consider to be the way in which we live and shape our environment? We will look at classic worldviews as well as modern ones. We will look at myth. We will look at literature. We will look at all sorts of questions here around what it is that orients people's sense of the human and of meaning historically and in the early 21st century. So we'll look at religion as part of this, but also, and these also of course could be perhaps construed as being religious, consumer capitalism, the idea that the economy is everything. We are grounded by, we live for money. Scientific rationalism. Many would perhaps say that Richard Dawkins is espousing something very evangelical. He's anti-Christian, but he puts forward a worldview which he no less believes in as rigorously and as dogmatically as someone who holds to the creation narrative, for example, might espouse. Is humanism a religion? Is atheism a religion? And we look at this in the context of globalization, globalized ideologies, belief systems, looking at these from the perspective of previous eras, the spread of Buddhism, the Roman Empire, the Mongol Empire, British Empire, American Empire, and so on. And these are some of the modules that will be offered as part of the Global Philosophies programme. In the first year, you will take the global search for meaning and ethics, society and the good life, and then at least one of the following: Introduction to Hinduism and Buddhism, and Introduction to East Asian Traditions. You also have a range of optional and wild modules, and in the second year there'll be a module on global comparison that you will take alongside students, as it happens, who are doing religious studies. So there's a great opportunity for cross-fertilisation. And this is a selection of the modules that we offer on the Global Philosophies programme, anything from an introduction to Greek civilization, to global history of empires, to existentialism, to an introduction to philosophy. And then these are some of the modules that we offer at stage 2. So we offer specialist expertise and international experience. We give you the opportunity to go on a year abroad or spend a year in industry, and we would be able to talk through some of the questions you have about some of the places that you might want to go to get a very rewarding educational journey from your time at Kent. So I hope that you have found this talk useful. My name is Chris Deasy, and I'm very much looking forward to meeting you in due course and to answer any questions that you have about the religious studies and global philosophies programmes here at the University of Kent.